Well, we get a break from basketball talk. We get to talk some lacrosse now with Tim.
They played in Virginia and came back and won.
They did. They came back and won. So tell us about it, Tim.
Yeah. I can tell you a little bit more than Paulie, it sounds like. Yeah, no, it was a good win. I was worried going into the game because we had talked about how I thought it was going to be a close game, considering how hungry and desperate Virginia was to win a game. And Syracuse got down 5-1. The end of the first quarter, maybe the biggest play of the game was Jimmy Mcool saved one right in front of him, like a crease shot when it was 5-1, and they got it upfield quickly, and Peyton Anderson, who got the start at attack, a freshman, scored an unbelievable crease dive goal to make it, instead of 6-1 at the end of the first quarter, it was 5-2. Syracuse was able to kind of get back in the game and then started the third quarter very well. And as far as what changed for them in the second half, they just didn't turn it over, which was really awesome. They only had one turnover in the entire second half, and because of that, they outshot Virginia 17-5 in the fourth quarter. The Cavaliers had a couple costly turnovers late, and Syracuse made some good adjustments defensively. And even though going into the game, I really thought that they'd be in a good spot at the face-off X, and John Mullen has been one of the best in the country, I thought that was going to be a big advantage for them in the game. And it wasn't. And even though they didn't win the faceoffs and they were down 5-1, they got what ended up being a really gritty 12-10 win over Virginia.
We've seen them start some halves slowly, right? There was the second half was the issue in the two losses, and then Gary Gate addressed that. And, this game they got off to, and we've seen some slow starts to start the game as well. Anything to it, or is there anything that you could point to and say, this seems to be a reoccurring problem, or is it just a case of, teams are going to go through some lulls, and they've had a few, right out of the start of a half?
Yeah, it's been more start of the third quarter has been their issue than start of games. The Manhattan game, they did not score a goal in the first quarter, and that was kind of puzzling, but that was a lot. Manhattan's goalie was tremendous. I mean, you think about the losses they had, it wasn't the start of the game against Harvard, of course. They got up 5-0. It was the start of the third quarter against Maryland, and in Utah, they came out a little bit slow in the third quarter. I think they've had some lapses in terms of the offense, and it feels like they haven't totally put it together for an entire game. But I will say it was kind of encouraging the way they won this game, because they've had a problem of sometimes getting up and having a big lead and then letting it slide. And it just felt like they were better positioned going into the fourth quarter because they had kind of some momentum on their side, the way they had come back in the game. And I thought it was really impressive. They get down 5-1 in a game that you really do not want to lose. ACC opener. If you lose that game, the margins are really thin in lacrosse, that you're talking about them maybe being right on the bubble. They would have been right on the bubble, and it would have been a tough loss to take. Now they're still a top 10 team. They went up to number 7 in the polls. But I thought it was good that they faced some adversity, and they made a timeout when it was 4-1, and John O'Dearn, the defensive coordinator for Syracuse, just laid into all of them in the huddle. I mean, you could see it, and he was animated. And I think from that point on, they really buckled down and stuck to the game plan. So in a way, it was positive for me to see that this team that is now more experienced was able to kind of get through adversity early on in a tough game, really.
And sometimes you need to learn how to win those games. And maybe the last couple of years have been the process of learning how to win games like that. You brought up the name Peyton Anderson. Can you speak to him getting the start, and do you think that that's something that will continue?
So it was surprising because Trey Deer had scored 4 goals in each of the last 2 games. And for those that haven't been following, Finn Thompson was the third attack guy out of camp, and we thought he was kind of battling with Trey Deer and Peyton Anderson for that role. Finn Thompson gets off to a great start to the season. He gets hurt against Utah in the first half and has not played since. So he's missed the last 4 games now, I think it is. And Trey Deer had been starting in his place for the first 3 games. Peyton Anderson is someone that is very highly regarded in terms of a recruit. He's a freshman, top 20 in the nation. And speaking with Gary and even hearing his post-game sort of media availability after it, he said that it was matchup-based this game. I think Peyton played well enough that I would probably expect him to start the next game. He had 2 goals. And he gives them just a little bit of a different look offensively. He's a really big, dynamic dodger as a freshman. Trey Deer is a Canadian box lacrosse crease finisher. And I went back and sort of thought about the end of the Virginia game last year, where they made a change in the last maybe 6 minutes of that game to come back. And it's when they switched Christian Moulet from starting attack and dropped down Michael Leo to start an attack. And it's because Virginia was short-sticking Mcool. So for those that don't follow lacrosse super closely, you can't just put 6 poles out there, unfortunately. You can only put 4 on the field. So sometimes teams will make the decision when there's a talented midfield and maybe a third attack guy that isn't that good, we're going to actually use one of our poles on that second midfield guy versus that final attack guy. And I think Syracuse was worried that Trey Deer would see a short stick. And because of what Virginia did to Christian Mcool last year and what they've had a tendency of doing, so they went to Peyton Anderson, and he saw a pole, and they knew that if they did short stick Peyton Anderson, he's just a different type of dodger that could have gotten around that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And so when Finn comes back, do you expect...
That's the question.
Right.
Because, and the weird thing about it is, I will say Trey Deer, I also thought they've been needing a little bit of a boost to the second midfield line, and I thought when Peyton Anderson got the start that this was in a way also beefing up that second midfield line, put Trey Deer back where he was, which was the second midfield line before Finn's injury. We didn't see Trey Deer on the second midfield line. We did see him play on the man-up unit, so he wasn't injured or anything. He warmed up like normal, but that's a little bit odd to me. I thought we would at least see Deer, who scored 4 goals in each of the last 2 games, on the field in some capacity. I think some of it is Virginia, just the matchup. They have really long defenders. It was tough for Syracuse to get opportunities inside and by the crease. I was thinking through the 12 goals they had. Really, the only shots they had inside were off a rebound. I mean, it was pretty much shots from the outside. So it just didn't really fit Trey Deer's game that much.
All right, Jimmy Mcool continues to rack up the saves in net, 35 saves over the course of the last 2 games combined. Obviously, great that he's making those stops. Is it a concern that he's facing that many shots on goal?
Maybe slightly, but I think overall the takeaway is Jimmy Mcool has been really good, and what he's doing is better than maybe we would have thought. Even he came in like Peyton Anderson, highly recruited. We just haven't seen him on the field. Now he's a junior. He's been kind of biding his time behind Will Mark. So outside of the Harvard game, like we've said, he has been playing at an All-American level in net. In the last 2 games, he has been a huge part of the story. He made some huge saves late in that game. So. I think overall the defense has been really encouraging through basically the first half of the season as they get deeper into kind of these big games here in ACC play. You got to feel good about what you're getting from Syracuse's defense and what you're getting from the goalie as well. Mcool is playing like one of the better goalies in the country the last couple of weeks.
Now, you mentioned a moment ago that if Syracuse were to lose to Virginia, that they would have been considered on the bubble. So we look at the rest of their games. They got 4 games left, all against ranked opponents.
Yeah.
What do they need to do to not have to worry about that?
Right. I would say win 1 more in the regular season, and if it's an ACC win and you finish 2-2 in league play, I think you're fine at that point. The bubble is shaping up to be a little bit favorable for the ACC in a way. I feel like there could be 4 ACC teams the way it's trending. I know the Ivy League's having a good year, Big Ten's having a good year, but the Big East does not have a team inside the top 30 in RPI right now. So that's probably a 1-bid league. It doesn't look like there's going to be like true bid stealers from the other conferences. I guess that'll come into play more when we get to conference tournaments. But I think if they were to win one of their last 4 games, I guess now, that you're looking at, including 3 ACC games and playing number 1 Cornell, they're all tough games, then you're probably still on the inside of the bubble going into the ACC tournament, which, I mean, you probably got to win 1 more game to punch your ticket to the ACC tournament. But, yeah, I think they'll be fine considering how the national landscape is. It's an odd thing in lacrosse where they are a top 10 team, and if they lose out, they will be outside the NCAA tournament picture. But it's also nice that they're playing a lot of teams that are considered really good, so their RPI is not going to be too shaken up by losses based on how the games go.
So a little bit of margin for error here. So 2 more wins the rest of the way. Subcapacity probably gets it done.
Yeah, I think if you beat Notre Dame, you're first in the ACC after 2 weeks. Like, I don't really see a world they're falling out of the NCAA because that's such a nice win to have too. Any of these wins coming up are, you put that in your back pocket and you feel great about it.
Sure. All right. So along those lines, how do they match up with Notre Dame?
Notre Dame's good. I mean, they aren't as good as they have been in the last 2 years when they were the number 1 team, no doubt, in the country. Right now, they're number 5 in the polls. I think Syracuse matches up pretty well with them. It's going to be interesting how John Mullen does at the face-off X, kind of trying to bounce back from his only tough game this year. And He's been called for a lot of violations, which is something that I'm sure he's trying to figure out why exactly I'm getting those violations and what does that mean in terms of an adjustment I have to make. Notre Dame has a second-team All-American in the midseason face-off guy in Will Lynch. John Mullen was third-team in the midseason All-American list at the face-off position. So they don't have Pat Cavanaugh, which is nice because he scored like 9 points per game against Syracuse the last 4 or 5 years. But they still have his younger brother, Chris. They've got Jake Taylor, who's a great finisher in close range. So I think Notre Dame is still a tough matchup. Syracuse hasn't beat them in the last 7 tries. So I expect a close game, but I think you'd have to, imagine that Notre Dame is slightly favored going in, even though it is at the Dome, and hopefully it's a great crowd on Saturday.
We've got another minute or two. Since you brought up Cornell, let me ask you about the Big Red.
Yeah.
Ranked number 1 in the country. In your opinion, you watch a lot of lacrosse. Are they the best team in the country?
I think if I was making a poll, I would put them number 1, but it's just such a weird year where I don't know if you can definitively say anyone is truly the best. I mean, I don't think Syracuse is going to go into that game and, all these games, like the next 2 weeks, Syracuse is maybe playing 2 of the top 4 or 5 teams in the country, and they're right now number 7, but I would expect Notre Dame's going to be like a 1.5 favorite, maybe. Cornell will be like a 1.5 favorite, would be my guess. I mean, we'll see when the line comes out. But that's just the nature of lacrosse this year, where 1 to 10, there's not a big drop-off.
All right, Tim. Great stuff as always. We'll see you on the TV side of things tomorrow night.
Yes.
At News Channel 9,
yep.
7 to 7:30 for our Orange Nation TV show. Tim Leonard joining us here on the program. We'll take a timeout. Phone lines open the rest of the way, 315-437-7644. We're back after this on ESPN Radio.